I just saw over the weekend Clint Eastwood's latest movie called Hereafter. And you know, Clint Eastwood's someone that I've come to admire very much as a filmmaker. Gran Torino, I argued, has one of the best Christ figures in recent cinema. And both Gran Torino and Million Dollar Baby have a very positive depiction of priests and the liturgy. So Eastwood is very interested in spiritual matters. And so I wasn't terribly surprised to see his new movie, Hereafter, deals with a spiritual theme, namely life after death. Um, it begins with an extraordinary scene, beautifully crafted scene, of a tsunami sweeping through this seaside tropical village. And one of the main characters is a young French journalist, and she is swept up literally in the tsunami. She's knocked unconscious, she drowns, she's effectively dead. And during that time, she has a classic near-death experience. She comes out of it, she's revived, she heads back home to Paris to resume her very high-powered life, but she can't quite reconnect because she's so preoccupied with this extraordinary experience. Eastwood then tells a story, they're all interwoven eventually, the story of Marcus, who's a young English kid who has a twin brother, and the twin brother is tragically killed in an auto accident. And Marcus goes into a kind of a tailspin, and he's preoccupied with contacting his brother. And he goes to all kinds of psychics and charlatans, and to say the least, he's unimpressed by these figures. But in the course of his searching, he comes across a largely defunct website run by Matt Damon's character, and he's sort of the hinge of the whole movie. Because it turns out this character can contact the dead. And it's very clear in the movie, he's the real deal. He's not a charlatan, he's not a fake psychic. He really can contact the dead. The movie comes to its conclusion when these three stories kind of interweave, and I won't give away the ending. I want to reflect a little bit on the role of religion in relation to this question of life after death. How religion is treated and not treated in Eastwood's movie. In some ways, it's an exploration of different approaches to the question of the afterlife. Go back to the journalist. She comes back to Paris, and she's afraid even to mention the near-death experience to her colleagues because she'll be laughed out of the room. She asks one of her colleagues very bluntly, what do you think happens when we die? He says, c'est le vide. It's just the void. I mean, it's just lights out. So he's the voice of secular European nihilism. You know, there's nothing after death. She endeavors to write a book on her experience. She brings it to a serious Parisian publisher, and he says, well, you know, we won't publish it, but maybe an American publisher will do it. In other words, those poor Yahoo Americans might take this seriously, but, you know, we don't over here in France. Things get a little more nuanced when she goes to a scientist, a researcher who works in a hospice for the dying, and who's become convinced there really is a life after death. So she confirms, yes, what you've experienced, many people have experienced, but then she's quick to add, but I'm an atheist. And so, yes, life after death, but no relation to God. Poor Marcus, when he goes on his search to find his dead brother, he does confront Christians. He comes across a Christian on a website who says, if you believe, you know, in Jesus Christ, you'll never be separated from your loved ones who have died. And the kid just shakes his head, like, that has nothing to do with my experience. And at his brother's funeral, it's a kind of a terrible scene because they're brought to this, one-size-fits-all chapel, and there's an Anglican clergyman who is just clearly going through the motions. Talks about the angels and living with the saints and all that, but you can tell he doesn't care, doesn't really believe it. And then very coldly says to the family, you can pick up the ashes after the ceremony. So it's like Christianity has nothing to say about any of this. Maybe most remarkable is George himself. That's the character played by Matt Damon. And George contacts the dead. There's no question about it. He knows there's life after death. He knows people live beyond this life. God is never mentioned, though, by George. Never. People come to him and they say, could you contact my loved ones? And he does, and he tells them things from beyond the grave. There's even a communication from someone who feels deep regret in the afterlife. We'd say he's in purgatory, right? God, however, is never mentioned. It's as though there's this phenomenon of life after death, but everyone is detached from it, and a religious connection is never made. Now, here's what struck me. is obviously it's Christianity, which is largely bequeathed to the West, this idea of life after death. It's a Christian idea that people live on after they die. But yet it's being treated here in a kind of denatured way. It's deracinated from its Christian roots. And see, that's peculiar, because Christianity, above all, knows that when we die, we really die. What I mean is, the body really dies and eventually disintegrates. The brain and the brain chemistry fades away. Christians take death, physical death, with great seriousness. So what's the ground for believing in life after death? It is only through God, it seems to me. Both from the Christian tradition and from common sense, it's only through God's power that we can speak of someone yet perduring, that we exist in God. We exist through the power of God, now and in the life to come. Therefore, it's very odd, it seems to me, to say, oh yeah, life after death, maybe, is an intriguing possibility, but who cares about God? You can't separate them out. You can't separate them out. See, I think what his movie represents is a very deep longing within the human heart. We have indeed been created for God. We are indeed even now connected to God. Therefore, we do have a longing, a hunger for life after death. But you cannot separate that hunger from the God who alone can satisfy it. So I like the movie. I'm glad that it might make people interested again. It might cause them to talk again about life after death. But I would say you cannot coherently affirm it without at the same time affirming God.